Our first class, we had tried to see that Kant's critique of pure reason comes in a very, very important framework. And in this framework, Kant generally divides his exposition into 4 parts to my mind, though there are 3 sections. The first section is called the transcendental analytic. The second section is called the transcendental analytic, and the third section, first is transcendental aesthetic, second is transcendental analytic, and the third is called the transcendental dialectic. But his introduction is very important, and what we thought was that we will initially try and see that what are the main problems and what are the kinds of terms which he is using and how is he using those terms. So in our first class, we had seen a few things, and in those things what we had seen was that we were trying to work out the main problem, and the main problem seems to be a problem which is a problem of Kant, which is a very important problem of method, because Kant is saying that सभी विषयों के अंतर्गत एक प्रकार की निश्चयात्मकता और प्रगति हमको दिखाई देती है, पर फिलॉसफी में नहीं दिखाई देती. और ये वाली बात आप सब लोग भी इस बात से एग्री करते होंगे कि आप लोग जब क्लास के बाहर जाते हैं तो सब लोग आपसे पूछते हैं कि फिलॉसफी में क्या बताया जाता है, तो आप क्या बताते हैं? आप कहते हैं फिलॉसफी में पर्सन के बारे में पढ़ते हैं, फिलॉसफी के बारे में गॉड के बारे में पढ़ते हैं, फिलॉसफी के बारे में वर्ल्ड के बारे में पढ़ते हैं. तो फिर आप सबसे पूछेगा, अच्छा बताओ गॉड है कि नहीं, फिलॉसफी क्या कहती है? तो आप क्या जवाब देते हैं? What is the kind of answer do you give? You say that there are certain people who have given arguments to prove the existence of God. There are certain people who say that there are no arguments to prove the existence of God. And then you say that there are certain people who believe that there is a need for the arguments to prove the existence of God. There are certain people who say that there is no need. So there does seem to be that there is no particular concept in philosophy about which there is any kind of a unanimity. And this is also the kind of a difficulty which you found in Descartes, because that why does Descartes write the discourse on method? He says that unlike the history of sciences, the history of philosophy does not provide us with any one particular concept about which we can say that this is what we say, and this is where we will move from. So he thought that maybe the difficulties with method, and so he in his own time presented a discourse on method, and he repeats that in the meditations. Similarly, कांट के इंट्रोडक्शन में भी बराबर ये डिफिकल्टी सामने आती है कि हम लोगों को सभी चीज़ों को, हम सामान्य रूप से जिनका हम प्रत्यक्ष करते हैं, जिन चीज़ों का हम ज्ञान प्राप्त करते हैं, उन संदर्भों में फिलॉसफी एक अकेला ऐसा डिसिप्लिन मालूम देता है जिसमें कि हमारी किसी भी चीज़ में कोई मतैक्य नहीं है. एंड देयरफॉर ही वांट्स टू से दैट व्हाट इज द मेथोडोलॉजिकल डेफिसिट, and therefore we saw that he said that let us try and find out how do we get synthetic a priori judgments. That is the way he puts the problem. And in our last class we said that we can reformulate the question is what are the limits of actual and possible experience. And then we had said that maybe there are 4 other very central problems which Kant is addressing. 1, what is the nature of space and time? 2, what is the nature of causality? 3, what is the nature of person? And 4, which is a technical problem, that how do we look at statements of physics, especially theoretical physics and mathematics. So when we are taking a statement like 7 plus 5 is equal to 12, then is it a purely analytical a priori necessary statement, or as some people say, John Stuart Mill this is attributed to Mill, but I have a reading in which this is not the case, but nonetheless. But the popular view is that these are very highly general statements like probability statements. So it's a level of generalization even in mathematics. So the mathematical certainty is actually also something which we get out of. And how do we get it? We get it by generalization. Now that seems to be an extremely difficult view to accept. And on the other hand, this view also seems to be a very difficult view to sustain, that these are only analytical statements as generally understood according to Kant. So in the introduction, if you will look at we will see that there are 4 or 5 sections in the introduction. And if you look at the 5, I think there are many philosophers and critics जो introduction के अंतर्गत भी 4-5 चीज़ें देखते हैं. आप लोगों ने सब हम लोगों ने कल परसों जब बात की थी तो ये कहा था कि हम लोग इंट्रोडक्शन देख के आते हैं और एस्थेटिक देख के आते हैं. तो इंट्रोडक्शन में 4-5 बातें महत्वपूर्ण रूप से नजर आती हैं, और भी आ सकती हैं. If you will tell, then we'll try and see how to do that. One is the distinction between empirical and pure knowledge. The second is the discussion on a priori and necessary, because these are the conditions which he says are there for. The third is the need for a science of a priori, कि क्यों ज़रूरत है हमारे पास, जिसको हम प्रागानुभव पे कह रहे हैं, उसके लिए एक वैज्ञानिक सिद्धांत की. And then the fourth section, I think, or the fourth important issue that he's taking is the distinction between analytic and synthetic judgments. The fifth is about synthetic a priori judgments. And then we have the general problem, which is the general problem which he's going to deal in the 3 sections of the critique of pure reason. Now, what is the distinction between empirical and pure knowledge? So I see a mobile, I see a mountain, I see all of these things when I see, then these are cases of empirical knowledge. Now you know that philosophy में हम लोग इतनी बार ये शब्द इस्तेमाल करते हैं, ये भी साधारण अंग्रेजी का शब्द नहीं, empirical नहीं, सब लोग experiential या sensory या इस तरीके का कोई शब्द इस्तेमाल करते हैं. But here we are talking about empirical knowledge. And the very first sentence, so to say, is actually the key to the entire critique of pure reason. All our knowledge begins with experience, but it is not wholly derived from experience. Now this is a very strange kind of a sentence, but because derivation from experience, what does it mean? हम लोग अपनी क्लास में जब प्री पीएचडी क्लास डिस्कस कर रहे थे तो हम लोग वेरिफिकेशन थ्योरी ऑफ मीनिंगफुलनेस ऑफ स्टेटमेंट्स की बात कर रहे थे. वहाँ तक पहुँचते पहुँचते ये बात होती है कि what does it mean to a statement to be empirical? Either it is empirical or you can get a finite set of sentences which can be either confirmable or verifiable or satisfied by experience. And then you have the counterpart where they said that it must be a finite set which can give you the conditions for its falsification, which seems to be the counterpart of that. And then as we come to the 20th century, we also know that what is meant by an observation statement. What is an observation, unit of observation? Is it the sense data? Is it the sensa? Is it the nerve ending stimulus? Is it the synthesis which happens in the brain? What is it? तो ऑब्जर्वेशन सेंटेंसेस जो हम लोग को बड़ा आसान लगता था, वो बात भी अपने आप में इतनी आसान है नहीं. But nonetheless, the question is कि everything begins with experience. This is in fact a general kind of a thing which Kant takes from common sense and of course from the currency of the philosophers at that time, broadly the empiricists. So whether it is Locke, whether it is Berkeley, whether it is Hume, all of them would agree that all our knowledge begins with experience. But the second thing is that it is not derived from experience. Not all of it is derived from experience, which means that there is some other element also in our knowledge. So when I say that this is a pair of spectacles, when I say that this is a green thing, then what am I saying and how am I saying? And so there are impressions which are drawn from experience, and knowledge consists of these impressions which are derived from experience together with other elements which are applied by our faculty. और जैसे मैंने आपसे पहले भी कहा था कि ये लैंग्वेज अपने आप में फैकल्टी साइकोलॉजी की है, कि साइकोलॉजी में जिस तरीके से माना जाता है कि हमारे पास एक सेंसिबिलिटी की एक क्षमता है, एक अंडरस्टैंडिंग की क्षमता है, एक रीजन की क्षमता है, वो लैंग्वेज ये यहाँ पर बोरो कर रहे हैं. So if I only have an experience of yellowness, then do I see this little bag? I don't. So I have to categorize the experience firstly. Even what is to count as an experience of yellowness, it means that that's something, I have an experience which has to be then categorized as yellow, an experience of a yellow extended thing, and then which means that yellow is a quality and it is the quality of things which are extended. And extension is something which is spatial. So, when I say a simple thing that this is a yellow bag for keeping a mobile, then even a simple sentence like that is actually not just an observation sentence. The observation sentences, all observation sentences, or all of so-called records of experience are actually a combination of something which is provided by the experience and something which is not provided by the experience by itself. And this is a commonplace. Everybody who has read Kant knows it very well. कि ये वाली बात उनकी commonplace. But this is something which he has to repeat again and again, again and again, again and again. Almost in the entire Critique of Pure Reason, you will find the reference of it every fifth paragraph. And especially when it comes to the last section, the illusions of the mind, or what he called the dialect, the logic of illusion, when he is discussing why do we believe in God, why do the first cause, etc. etc. Now, जब हम किसी चीज़ को रेखांकित कर रहे हैं, के बारे में बात कर रहे हैं, तो हमें कॉजालिटी का नोशन बहुत ज़रूरी होता है. अब कॉजालिटी का नोशन के साथ ही साथ हम लोग साधारण तौर पर किस चीज़ के बारे में सोच रहे हैं? हर चीज़ का कारण होता है. हर चीज़ का कारण होते होते हम पहुंच जाते हैं फर्स्ट कॉज पे. फर्स्ट कॉज की बात कर सकते हैं कि नहीं कर सकते? फर्स्ट कॉज की बात कर सकते हैं कि नहीं कर सकते? कर सकते? नहीं कर सकते. आप सब लोगों ने फिलॉसफी ऑफ रिलीजन में भी और सब जगह पढ़ा कि जब आप कहते हैं कि एवरी, क्योंकि अब आप कॉजालिटी की बात क्या कर रहे हैं? लुक एट द होल प्रिंसिपल ऑफ कॉजालिटी. व्हाट इज द प्रिंसिपल ऑफ कॉजालिटी? टेल मी. What is the principle of causality? The principle of causality is a simple sentence that everything has a cause. Now, if everything has a cause, can you make the second claim? There is a first cause. Either the first thing is true or the second is not true. Agar if everything has a cause, then there can be no first cause, because then you are saying that there is a thing which doesn't have a previous cause, which means that the principle of causality does not operate there. तो एक वो शोपेनहावर का बड़ा मशहूर सा वाक्य था जो आप सब लोगों ने पढ़ा था. वो ये था कि भाई आप यहाँ पे कॉजालिटी को यू आर यूजिंग लाइक एन उबर और अ टैक्सी, कि आपने कहा कि हाँ कॉजालिटी वहाँ तक जा रहे हैं, अब गॉड पे पहुँच गए, अब तुम वापस जाओ, अब OTP नंबर अपना बताओ और फिर जाओ. तो आइदर यू आर सेइंग you're wanting to prove God by the principle of causality. So either you believe in the principle of causality or you don't. How can you both believe it and talk about the first cause? So there are certain kinds of huge amount of difficulties which were there in simple things. और क्योंकि क्यों बात हो रही है कि हम कह रहे हैं every event has a cause. Now every event has a cause. ये principle कैसे जानते हैं? Experiences से जानते हैं. पर experience से क्या जानते हैं? This event has a cause, that event has a cause. 100 events have a cause. मम्मी ने भी बताया था, पापा ने भी बताया था, किताबों में भी लिखा हुआ, सब में लिखा हुआ है, डार्विन ने भी बताया, सब लिखा है, एवरी has. पर एवरी का स्कोप लॉजिकली क्या है? एवरी का लॉजिकल स्कोप है ऑल पास्ट, प्रेजेंट एंड फ्यूचर. कैन दैट एवर बी एन ऑब्जेक्ट ऑफ एनीबडीज एक्सपीरियंस? नो. देयरफॉर एवरीथिंग हैज अ कॉज. दिस प्रिंसिपल cannot be derived from experience. Can it be? Unless it is read in another way, that when I am saying that every event has a cause, I am using it as a statement of high probability. पर every event has a cause is a statement of high probability. ये भी आप मान सकते हैं क्या? High probability किस चीज़ की होती है? जो हमेशा होता रहता है. हमेशा जो चीज़ होती रहती है वो आगे भी होगी. ऐसा क्यों? आपने ह्यूम पढ़ा था ना, आगे की घटनाएं पुरानी घटनाओं जैसी होंगी. ये मानने का क्या आधार है? कि प्रकृति ऐसे चलती है ना. प्रकृति जैसी अब तक चलती थी वैसे ही आगे चलेगी. इसको मानने का क्या आधार है? So uniformity of nature cannot be a presumption of probability, because probability itself is the uniformity of nature itself is dependent upon the principle of probability. Therefore, your belief that everything has a cause this statement cannot be drawn from experience. But can you have knowledge without this concept of causality? Is it definition? It's not a definitional statement. Is it experiential? It is not. So what is the nature of these things which are functioning like a rule and are necessary for your knowledge? This is the kind of a problem which Kant is struggling with. And he's saying that this is in one sense a priori. All events have a cause is an a priori knowledge. When we talk about our experience, we talk about change. Change is in time. We want to know what are these elements of how do we know time, etc. So I'm just giving you a broad sketch that this is the kind of a problem that he has initially, as we said that what is the difference between empirical and pure knowledge, and then he has this say that हम लोगों के पास कुछ हिस्सा ऐसा ज्ञान का है जो a priori है. We have some element of a priori knowledge in that. Now, here again, one very important thing in Kant is to understand the notion of experience. What is meant by experience? In one sense, experience should mean only sense experience, that which we receive by the senses. But Kant is certainly not using the term experience in this sense. He is saying that experience is that which we gather from sensation and on which we apply the categories of understanding. Right. Oh yes, precisely. This is what he is dealing that, and that we will come to. How can a causality be a logical necessity? This was a very popular belief. Professor Rajni was also mentioning this, that why can't we go back to Leibniz and take that idea? But that idea, again, I'll come to that a little later, but since you have asked the question, I'll immediately address it. In Leibniz, there is that we have monads have no windows. We have experiences. There's also an idea of a perfect concept. And everything in the world, so every present state is full with the future and every present state is completely determined by the past. This is the kind of a metaphysical picture that you find in monadology. When you look at his other essays on primary and secondary truths, in and around the same time, 2-3 years in and after. But what is the discussion? The idea is that there are truths of reason. Truths of reason are actually those which are true only by proven by the principle of non-contradiction, because they have the structure of identity. A is A. Now, if somebody has a perfect concept of something, so if I have a perfect concept of Gaurav, then not only that Gaurav is a human being, but that Gaurav is going to wear a maroon shirt on the 17th or the 18th or 17th of August 2023 also follows out of necessity. And therefore, everything, somebody who knows the perfect concept of Gaurav knows everything about Gaurav, and therefore every sentence about Gaurav will be necessary and analytic. Though this fact that today you are wearing a maroon shirt seems to be apparently contingent, and it does not seem to be related to other choices of yours, like wearing a black spectacles or wearing a fawn pant or wearing a silver watch. These statements seem to be unconnected. But from the concept of Gaurav, all this should follow necessarily. Now, this thing seems to be very counterintuitive. And even in case of Leibniz, he has a difficulty and a resolution which is equally problematic. For God, all these statements are necessary. For me and you, they are not. Now, this relativization of the concept and of necessity to the knower becomes very problematic, because you also introduce this thing, why can't we make it logical? Because the moment you make it logical, you see that it becomes people proof. But instead of becoming people proof, it is becoming subject relative, and here at least true subject relative. And here he is not alone. The two-subject relativity is already available in Berkeley. Because Berkeley is also saying that there are two kinds of ideas, one in the mind of God and the one in the ideas of human beings. Human beings see and they can fail, but the so-called objective things are also not objective physical things, but they are ideas in the mind of God. Because so he reduces the ontological explanation in terms of a single principle, which is the principle of consciousness, but he introduces two knowers. Here also in Leibniz a similar kind of a thing is happening, and you can't make a causal necessity to be logical necessity. That can you make dahi without milk? It seems to be causally not possible. Although yesterday we were looking at these things कि वो उन्होंने एक मशीन बनाई है कि वो एक सेल लेके और उससे they will give you a steak out of it by artificial intelligence. तो एक सेल किसी भी चीज़ का निकाल के वो दही भी आपको दे देंगे. So it's, but again the question is that it is a physical law which is empirically confirmed, disconfirmed, and which changes, and not a logical necessity. That a triangle without three angles is impossible, but dahi without doodh seems to be only physically. Can I play tennis underwater? It seems physically impossible, but logically. So therefore causal necessities and logical necessities are not the same, and therefore the force of a physical necessity and within that, but see, here the principle is not about physical necessity also, it is about the universal law of causality. Is the universal law of causality that every event has a cause, is this a logical law? Doesn't seem to be a logical law. Is it an empirical generalization? Doesn't seem to be an empirical generalization. And therefore, but it is fundamental to our understanding of anything as an experiential object. So how do we explain this thing? And this, he says, is the a priori element of our knowledge. तो हम जब ज्ञान की बात करते हैं तो हमारे ज्ञान में ये चीजें, so there is, we are in possession of certain modes of a priori knowledge. And what are these? There are many statements according to him which are both, sorry.
सर ये जो आपने कहा कि वो empirical generalization भी नहीं है, पर हम क्यों नहीं कह सकते, because we have not seen a single event जो कि without cause हो. So on the basis of our जितने भी हमारे experiences हैं, एक generalization है कि we have not seen, जैसे वो न्याय का जो कहते हैं कि अभी तक हमने नहीं देखा है, इसलिए जो है वो generalization.
अगर इसको हम जनरलाइजेशन मान लें तो ये नेसेसरी नहीं होगा, नहीं होगा. और लेकिन ये मानते हैं कि ये हमारे लिए ये एक एवरी इवेंट हैज अ कॉज, ये एक नेसेसरी स्टेटमेंट है, पर ये एक तरीके की लॉजिकल नेसेसिटी नहीं है. और जनरलाइजेशन का मतलब ये है कि ये फॉल्स भी हो सकता है. एम्पिरिकल जनरलाइजेशन में वो ये कहते हैं कि आपके यहाँ लॉजिकल पॉसिबिलिटी ऑफ इट टर्निंग आउट टू बी फॉल्स, दैट मे बी इन फ्यूचर यू विल फाइंड सम इवेंट व्हिच डज नॉट हैव अ कॉज, तो ये हमारी थ्योरी फेल हो जाएगी. तो क्या ये हम इसको उस लेवल का रखना चाह रहे हैं या हम इसको एक जनरल रूल की तरीके से ट्रीट कर रहे हैं? ये इनकी प्रॉब्लम है, और इसीलिए ये मानते हैं कि ये so whether it is in our everyday life or in the case of our physical sciences, we assume this to be true. And this assumption is certainly not coming from experiences. See, this is what he is again trying to call your attention to, is that which particular experience is actually justifying it. And the history is that he is saying that he's actually been woken up by Hume. And Hume is talking about discrete individual experiences in forms of ideas and impressions. Because this is precisely what Quine has questioned. that actually empiricism is true not in terms of individual sentences being confirmed and disconfirmed, but by the whole gamut of our experiences being confirmed or disconfirmed by experience. But the empiricists of the day, whether Locke or Berkeley or Hume, are talking about discrete units of experience which confirm or disconfirm a theory. And there is the problem that if you have discrete individual instances, how do you get to anything which is general? Which is in fact the challenge even with the verification theory of meaningfulness statement. But we thought कि verification theory of meaningfulness में ये पहली बार आ रहा है, but you find कि वो नहीं आ रहा है पहली बार. वो Kant address कर रहा है, whether or not Kant is able to give you a good answer or not, but you see that it is coming from Kant, and he said that there is an a priori element in all our knowledge. And there he says, as Dr. Schwarz was saying, that there is a special need to address this question philosophically. So we need a philosophical explanation of the for what he calls the science of a priori. And he thinks that the whole of metaphysics is in need of that. So critique of pure reason is meant to supply a science of a priori which philosophy needs. And the reason for the critical inquiry was that we did not understand metaphysics for too long, and we did not, we looked at mathematics and we looked at many other things. So mathematics gives us a very good example, according to him, of a priori knowledge. And this again is very peculiar because his understanding of a priori knowledge in mathematics is not the others. Now the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. Now what do you need for that? And here is the peculiarity. Kant is saying you need intuition for that. And what does he mean by intuition? A direct experience. So you are not just defining it in terms of that, you need an intuition. And what is the intuition? The capacity for you to imagine that there is a travel. And it's very interesting, which nobody does before Kant and nobody does after Kant, but this is his understanding. In arithmetic, he says, what is the unit in terms of which you are thinking of arithmetic? It is time. And in terms of geometry, he thinks that it is the unit of space, which again comes even from the root. Geometry is the science of geo, which is the earth, measuring the world. So geometry is the science of measuring the world. आपको पता ही है कि पहले वो हाथ और पैर से नापता होता है ना, अभी भी आता फीट जब कहते हैं. अब वो फीट किसका होता था? राजा का. अब वो चाइना का राजा है तो उसका इतना छोटा सा पैर है और अफ्रीका का राजा इतना बड़ा है, तो आपके अलग अलग फीट हो जाएंगे, अलग अलग मेजर्स हो जाएंगे. इस वजह से उसको स्टैंडर्डाइज किया गया. अब कैसे नापते हैं? What is the standard of measuring? मीटर. वो किसके स्टैंडर्ड मीटर क्या होगा? मेरा वाला जो है वो थोड़ा छोटा है और रजनी मैम ज़्यादा कपड़ा लेना चाहती हैं, तो उसी में से तो वो अपने घर से एक ले आई मीटर जो ज़्यादा बड़ा है. So what would be? What's the standard of meters in the others? Simple question of general knowledge. That there is a standard meter which we find discussed, and this is discussed in philosophy. Kripke and the others of you, that there is a standard meter rod in Paris, which does not expand or contract. It is made up of a element which is called iridium. But then now they said कि नहीं वो भी बहुत ही highly temperature पर high temperature पे तो बढ़ जाएगा, कम भी हो जाएगा. So what do you use there? You need a certain wavelength kind of a explanation for doing that. Why I am giving you all these examples? Because Kant discussion has taken such a long turn. So what he is now saying, again coming from the first sentence, that all our knowledge, though it begins with experience, it is not wholly constituted by that. There is element provided by certain other faculties, and some elements upon that are a priori. And so he said that there is a need for us to develop a certain kind of a. Now he says natural science contains synthetic a priori principles, and they are synthetic, and they are a priori. So all changes in the world occur, but still the quantity of matter remains the same. This, according to him, is a synthetic a priori judgment. And then, as I said, the fourth question is how are synthetic a priori judgments possible? उसमें वो ये बात कहते हैं कि मैथमेटिक्स और प्योर साइंस में तो होते हैं, मेटाफिजिक्स जो है वो भी एक साइंस की तरह क्या हो सकती है, एंड ही सेज कि बिल्कुल हो सकती है, और उसमें भी हम ऐसे प्रिंसिपल्स ला सकते हैं और जिनको वो दिखाते हैं. But there again he says that if you think that these are your basic metaphysical questions, does the world have a beginning in time or not? Does the world have infinite expansion in space or not? Then you will always get into contradictions. And this, he says, which I think is a very fundamental thing in Kant, that human being and human mind has a natural tendency towards asking these questions. And these questions, when pursued, you move from the limited to the unlimited, from the conditioned to the unconditioned, and therefore you end up in contradictions. So, can we solve the metaphysical questions? His answer is yes. And he thinks that the critique of pure reason will give you those answers, where reason will examine itself and tell you how answers to these problems can be provided.